In 1887, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote a single sentence that dismantled 2,000 years of Western moral philosophy. There are no moral phenomena at all, only a moral interpretation of phenomena. Not that people behave immorally, but that morality itself is not a discovered truth. It is a weapon, a strategy, a psychological tool used by one group to restrain another. Most philosophers ignored him. Most still do. But the 20th century would prove Nietzsche's ear was pressed to the rail of history, and he heard the train coming long before it arrived. He did not merely critique power, he predicted its psychological mechanics. He saw that the weak would invert the values of the strong and call their own ressentiment virtue. He saw that when God died, man would not become free, he would become unmoored. He saw that the will to power, not reason, not love, not justice, is the engine beneath every human act. These were not abstract provocations, they were diagnoses. And history has spent the last 130 years confirming them in blood. 3 historical proofs stand above the rest. Napoleon crossing the Alps, the Vatican's 1,000-year reign, the collapse of Weimar into chaos. Each one is Nietzsche's shadow falling across the century he never lived to see. The first proof is a man on a white horse. In 1796, Napoleon Bonaparte was a Corsican artillery officer with no political base, no noble blood, and no army larger than 30,000 starving men. By 1804, he had crowned himself Emperor of Europe. Nietzsche did not live to see Napoleon, but he recognized the type immediately. He called it the Übermensch, not a superhero, but a human being who creates his own values beyond the categories of good and evil. Napoleon was the first modern embodiment. Consider what Napoleon did. He inherited the French Revolution's chaos and imposed order through sheer force of will. He rewrote legal systems with the Napoleonic Code. He shattered the Holy Roman Empire. He placed his brothers on thrones from Madrid to Amsterdam. Conventional morality, the kind that forbids regicide, conquest, and self-coronation, simply did not apply to him. And here is Nietzsche's insight. It did not apply because Napoleon refused to accept the framework. Master morality in Nietzsche's system is not about cruelty. It is about self-assertion. The noble says yes to his own power before he says no to anything else. Napoleon said yes to himself so completely that Europe spent 2 decades trying to say no back. But the proof runs deeper than Napoleon's rise. It lies in his fall. Waterloo was not a moral reckoning. It was a psychological limit. Nietzsche warned that the will to power, if it becomes purely reactive rather than creative, collapses into its opposite. Napoleon's later campaigns, Russia, Leipzig, the 100 Days, were not acts of creation. They were acts of compulsion. He could not stop because he had never learned to rule himself. The will to power turned inward becomes self-destruction. Napoleon died on St. Helena, dictating memoirs that blamed everyone but himself. The Übermensch, reduced to a bitter ghost. Nietzsche's point was never that the powerful are invincible. It was that power, misunderstood as domination rather than self-overcoming, always eats its own. The second proof sits in the Vatican. The Catholic Church, for 2 millennia, has claimed divine authority. Nietzsche saw it differently. He saw the most sophisticated psychological operation in human history. His concept of ressentiment, a French term meaning resentment turned inward and weaponized, explains exactly how the Church conquered Rome. Here is the mechanism. In the ancient world, the powerful defined good as strength, beauty, and victory. The weak, slaves, the poor, the conquered, could not compete on those terms. So they inverted them. They declared that the meek would inherit the earth, that poverty was holiness, that suffering was a sign of divine favor. This, for Nietzsche, was slave morality. It did not abolish power. It simply rebranded weakness as virtue, and then used that virtue to judge the powerful as evil. The priest became the new aristocrat, not through armies, but through guilt. Tell a warrior that his pride is sin, and you have disarmed him without a blade. The Church's 1,000-year dominance is the proof. For centuries, kings who could crush any army knelt before bishops who carried no sword. Why? Because the bishops controlled the moral interpretation of phenomena. They defined what counted as good, and once you control the definition, you control the psychology of the entire civilization. Nietzsche saw that this was not a conspiracy. It was a natural psychological response of the powerless. But he also saw the cost. Slave morality does not elevate the weak. It poisons the strong. It teaches men to hate their own instincts. Western civilization, Nietzsche argued, had become a hospital where health was diagnosed as sickness. The Church's fall in the modern era, the empty pews, the scandals, the irrelevance, does not disprove his analysis. It confirms it. Slave morality worked for centuries, but when the weak finally win, they inherit a wasteland. Because a culture built on resentment cannot build anything at all. The third proof is the most disturbing. It is the one Nietzsche did not want to be right about. In The Gay Science, he wrote, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him." Most readers stop at the headline. They miss the next sentence. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? Nietzsche was not celebrating atheism. He was issuing a warning. For 2,000 years, European morality had rested on a divine foundation. Whether you believed or not, the structure of right and wrong was anchored to something outside human whim. When that anchor pulls free, the ship does not sail joyfully into freedom. It drifts into nihilism, the belief that nothing matters because there is no measure for mattering. The Weimar Republic, 1919 to 1933. This prophecy in real time. Germany had lost a war, an emperor, and a moral compass. In place of the Kaiser, it got democracy. In place of God, it got nothing. And the psychological consequences were catastrophic. Berlin became a carnival of decadence and despair. Cabarets celebrated degeneracy. Inflation wiped out savings overnight. Political violence became routine. The Nazis did not create this chaos. They walked into a vacuum and promised to fill it. Nietzsche had foreseen exactly this. When traditional morality dies, he wrote, the herd looks for a new shepherd. But because no transcendent value remains, the shepherd must offer the only thing left: raw will. The Nazi rise was not a failure of democracy, it was a failure of meaning. The German people, unmoored and terrified, traded their freedom for the comfort of a strong voice telling them what to hate. Nietzsche had named this figure too, the last man, the creature who has given up on greatness and asks only for comfort and security. The last man does not burn churches. He votes for the man who promises to burn them for him. Weimar collapsed not because of economic depression alone, but because a society without a shared moral framework cannot withstand the first whisper of a tyrant. God died in 1882. By 1933, the wolves had arrived. Three proofs. Napoleon, the will to power consuming itself. The Vatican, slave morality conquering through guilt. Weimar, the corpse of God breeding nihilism and then monsters. Nietzsche did not celebrate any of this. He diagnosed it with the precision of a pathologist cutting into a living patient. He saw that morality is not truth, but strategy. That power is not evil, but inevitable. That when meaning collapses, human beings do not become free. They become desperate. And desperate people will swallow any poison that promises to stop the hunger. So here is the question that follows you after the screen goes dark. If everything you call good and evil is only an interpretation, a weapon forged by someone somewhere for a purpose, what have you been arming without knowing it?